Welcome back to our channel. Today we bring you yet another captivating tale of a real-life drama told in story format. In this story, we travel to the harsh outback of Australia where Ricky Megee was drugged and left for dead. For the best experience, put on your headphones and sit back with your eyes closed so you can fully immerse yourself into the story. If you don't like this video, a llama might eat your favorite socks. So hit the like button and subscribe to avoid a wardrobe crisis. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy. It was late in January of 2006, one of the hottest months of the year, when Ricky Megee, a 35-year-old avid Australian adventurer, embarked on his road trip through the Northern Territory of Australia with a sense of adventure and a desire to escape the monotony of everyday life. The vast, rugged beauty of the outback had always called to him, and he once again relished the opportunity to explore its remote and untamed landscapes. This is where he felt most at peace. The horizon stretched endlessly before him, a mesmerizing expanse of red earth and sparse vegetation under an unrelenting sun. The air was thick with the dry, dusty scent of the outback, punctuated occasionally by the faint, sweet aroma of eucalyptus. Ricky had been driving for hours, his car the only sign of life on the desolate highway. The isolation was both exhilarating and daunting. As he neared the Barkly Tableland, a region known for its expansive plains and harsh climate, he noticed a group of men standing beside a broken-down vehicle. They flagged him down, and without hesitation, Ricky pulled over. It was common for travelers in the outback to help one another, given the harsh and unforgiving environment. The men appeared friendly and grateful for his assistance. They explained that their car had broken down and that they needed a ride to the nearest town to get help. Without thinking twice, Ricky, always willing to lend a hand, agreed to give them a lift, and they all hopped into his vehicle. Ricky felt completely at ease, as the atmosphere was cordial and completely relaxed. They chatted about their travels, shared stories of past adventures, and even joked about the unpredictable nature of the outback. Although Ricky had ventured into this rugged land precisely because he wanted to get away from the hustle and bustle of everyday life, he quite enjoyed the brief company of his fellow travelers. After driving for a while, one of the men offered Ricky a drink from a bottle they had with them. The drink was cool and refreshing, a welcome relief from the scorching heat outside. Ricky accepted it gratefully, unaware of the sinister plan unfolding around him. As he took a sip, the liquid tasted slightly off, but he dismissed it as just the peculiar flavor of an unfamiliar beverage. It wasn't long before Ricky began to feel strange. His head grew heavy, and his vision started to blur. An overwhelming sense of drowsiness washed over him, as if a thick fog was enveloping his mind. His limbs felt leaden, and he struggled to keep his eyes open. Panic set in as he realized something was terribly wrong, but his body betrayed him, succumbing to the potent drug that had been slipped into his drink. The men's voices grew distant and muffled, their words becoming unintelligible. At one point, Ricky could vaguely sense his body being moved, but he was powerless to resist. Darkness consumed him, pulling him into unconsciousness. When Ricky finally regained consciousness, he was disoriented and groggy. He found himself in a shallow grave and was covered by a sheet of black plastic. The harsh sun blazed down on him, blinding him as he tried to open his eyes. His head pounded with a vicious headache and his mouth was parched and dry. He lay still for a moment, trying to piece together what had happened. The ground beneath him was rough and abrasive, the coarse texture of the red dirt scratching against his skin. The air was filled with the acrid scent of dust and the faint, almost sweet smell of distant eucalyptus trees. As he sat up, the full weight of his situation hit him like a tidal wave. He was alone, abandoned in the middle of the outback. The landscape around him was desolate and unforgiving, with no sign of civilization in sight. He recognized the area as the Barkly Tableland. He had been here before, and it was definitely not the place he wanted to be stranded in without any provisions or survival gear. But it dawned on him that that is exactly the situation he found himself in. Ricky's heart raced as he started looking around. The sun was high in the sky, casting long shadows across the barren land. There was no sign of his car, or the men to whom he had offered the lift. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the occasional rustle of wind through the scrub and the distant call of a crow. A surge of panic threatened to overwhelm him, but Ricky forced himself to stay calm. He knew that panic would only make things worse. He needed to think clearly and focus if he was going to have any chance at surviving this ordeal. With grim determination, Ricky got to his feet and began to walk. Every step was a painful reminder of his dire situation. His body was weak from the drugs, his throat dry and raw. But he refused to give up. He knew that he had to keep moving, to keep searching for water and shelter if he had any hope of surviving the vast, unforgiving expanse of the Australian Outback. Ricky Megee's ordeal had begun, a journey that would test the very limits of his endurance and will to survive. Ricky Megee's first day in the Australian Outback was a blur of confusion, desperation, and sheer survival instinct. As the sun beat down mercilessly, Ricky's mind struggled to process the reality of his situation. He was in the Barkly Tableland, a vast, arid region with little to offer in terms of sustenance or shelter. The heat was oppressive, hovering around 120 degrees for most of the day, and every breath he took seemed to pull the moisture from his body, leaving his throat parched and his lips cracked. The sun's rays were relentless, making the ground beneath him hot to the touch, so hot that it would burn his skin if he made contact with it for just a few seconds. Ricky's skin also burned under the unyielding sun, each blistering ray a reminder of his dire predicament. His head throbbed with dehydration, and his vision blurred intermittently, making it difficult to focus on the landscape around him. Stumbling through the rugged terrain, Ricky's senses were assaulted by the harsh environment. The dry, dusty air carried the distant scent of saltbush and eucalyptus, mingling with the acrid odor of his own sweat. His mouth eventually became so dry that even the thought of water made it ache. He constantly scanned the horizon for any signs of water, desperately hoping for a creek, a water hole, or even a small puddle. The first night in the Outback was equally brutal. As the sun set, the temperature plummeted, and Ricky found himself shivering in the cold. The ground, which had been scorching hot during the day, now felt icy against his skin. The stars above him were brilliant, but their beauty was lost on Ricky as he grappled with the reality of his situation. The silence of the night was broken only by the distant howls of dingoes and the occasional rustle of a nocturnal creature in the bushes. Sleep was elusive. Every sound startled him awake, his mind racing with thoughts of what might be lurking in the darkness. His body ached from the hard ground, and the cold seeped into his bones. He wrapped his arms around himself, trying to conserve what little warmth he had, but it was a futile effort. With the dawn came a renewed determination. Ricky knew he had to find water if he was to survive another day. He resumed his search, his eyes scanning the landscape for any signs of moisture. His throat was raw, each swallow a painful reminder of his desperate need for hydration. After hours of searching, he stumbled upon a small, muddy puddle. The water was murky and filled with debris, but Ricky didn't hesitate. He cupped his hands and drank deeply, the dirty water a temporary reprieve from his raging thirst. Food was the next challenge. The barren landscape offered little in the way of sustenance. Ricky's stomach growled incessantly, the hunger gnawing at him. He scoured the area for anything edible, his desperation growing with each passing hour. Eventually, he found some edible plants and insects. The taste was bitter and repulsive, but it provided some sustenance he desperately needed. He forced himself to eat, knowing that he needed the energy to continue his search for more substantial food sources. The days blurred together as Ricky settled into a routine of survival. Each day was a battle against the elements and his own weakening body. His feet were blistered and swollen from walking across the rough terrain. His skin, already sunburned and peeling, became a canvas of insect bites and scratches. Yet, despite the physical agony, Ricky's will to survive kept him moving forward. And as if the physical torture he had to endure was not enough, emotional turmoil became a constant companion. Waves of hope and despair crashed over him with relentless regularity. The sight of a distant horizon filled him with fleeting optimism, only to be crushed by the realization of how alone he truly was. He often found himself shouting into the emptiness, his voice echoing back with a haunting finality. The isolation was maddening, and the fear of never being found loomed over him like a dark cloud. As the days turned into weeks, Ricky's determination remained steadfast. He knew that his survival depended on his ability to adapt and persevere. The Australian Outback was a harsh and unforgiving place, but Ricky Megee was resolved to endure, driven by an unyielding hope that rescue would come. Ricky Megee's survival in the Australian outback was a testament to human ingenuity and determination. Stranded in one of the harshest environments on Earth, he was forced to rely on his instincts and resourcefulness to find food and water. The process of foraging and surviving became his daily routine, each discovery a small victory in his battle against nature. The outback's landscape was both a blessing and a curse. The arid, red earth and sparse vegetation offered little in the way of sustenance, but Ricky quickly learned to identify the few edible plants and insects that could keep him alive. The first challenge was overcoming the psychological barrier of eating things he would never have considered as food under normal circumstances. Hunger, however, is a powerful motivator. Ricky began his foraging with caution. From experience talking with the indigenous people of this unforgiving land, he was well aware that many plants in the outback were poisonous, and that identifying the right ones was crucial. He had some basic knowledge of bush tucker, the Australian term for food foraged from the land, from his previous travels, but now that knowledge became a lifeline. He found small bushes with edible leaves, though they were bitter and tough. These plants provided minimal nutrition, but they were a start. Insects became a significant part of his diet. At first, the thought of eating bugs was revolting, but desperation quickly changed his perspective. The process of catching them was tedious and time-consuming. Ants and termites were abundant but small, requiring large quantities to make a meal. Grasshoppers were larger and provided more sustenance, but they were elusive and required quick reflexes to catch. The taste was earthy and gritty, a far cry from anything he had eaten before, but it was food, and it kept him going. Finding water was an ongoing challenge. The small, muddy puddles he encountered were often the only sources of hydration. The water was dirty, filled with insects and debris, but he had no choice but to drink it. He would filter it as best as he could through his shirt, trying to remove the larger particles, but it was still murky and unappealing. Despite its taste and appearance, the water was a crucial element in his survival. Shelter was another priority. The daytime heat was unbearable, and the nighttime cold was equally harsh. Ricky used branches, leaves, and any other materials he could find to create makeshift shelters. These shelters provided minimal protection from the elements, but were better than nothing. The process of building them was physically exhausting, but it gave him a purpose and a way to pass the time. Ricky's physical condition deteriorated as the days turned into weeks. His muscles weakened from lack of nutrition, and his body became a canvas of sunburns, blisters, and insect bites. Each step was a struggle. The sunburns were particularly painful, the intense heat causing his skin to blister and peel. Insect bites added to his misery, the constant itching and discomfort a reminder of his vulnerability. Despite the physical toll, Ricky's mental state remained remarkably resilient. He experienced moments of intense despair, the loneliness and isolation weighing heavily on him, but he refused to give up. His determination to survive kept him moving forward, each small victory in foraging and finding water a reminder that he could endure. Ricky's survival in the outback was not just a physical challenge, but a mental one. He had to adapt quickly, learning to read the land and its resources. He developed a routine, each day focused on the essentials of finding food, water, and shelter. This routine provided structure and a sense of control, crucial for maintaining his sanity in such extreme circumstances. After 71 days of relentless hardship in the Australian outback, Ricky Megee's ordeal came to a dramatic end when he was discovered by station workers. The sight of Ricky was shocking. Emaciated, sunburned, and covered in insect bites, he was barely recognizable. His clothes hung loosely on his skeletal frame, a sobering testament to the weeks of deprivation he had endured. The station workers were astonished by his appearance and immediately provided him with water, food, and medical attention. Ricky's initial sips of clean water and bites of nourishing food were overwhelming, a sensory overload after weeks of subsisting on insects and sparse vegetation. The taste of proper food, once taken for granted, was now almost too rich and flavorful for his starved palate. Physically, Ricky was in dire condition. His body was severely dehydrated and malnourished, his skin a painful patchwork of sunburn and insect bites. Emotionally, the rescue brought a complex mix of relief, gratitude, and trauma. Ricky had been isolated for so long that the sound of human voices and the touch of another person were almost alien to him. The mental toll of his experience was significant, and the road to psychological recovery was as challenging as his physical rehabilitation. After Ricky was stabilized, he was taken to the Royal Darwin Hospital in Darwin, Northern Territory, where he underwent further medical treatment. The doctors and nurses were amazed by his survival and resilience. He had to be gradually reintroduced to a normal diet, his body carefully monitored as it adjusted to regular food to prevent refeeding syndrome, a potentially fatal condition that can occur when someone who has been starving begins to eat again. Each meal was a step towards recovery, though the process was slow and painstaking. His digestive system, weakened by months of minimal nutrition, had to be coaxed back to health gently. During his recovery, Ricky reflected on his ordeal. The physical and mental scars were a constant reminder of the harrowing experience. The nights filled with fear and loneliness, the relentless search for food and water, and the sheer will to survive had changed him forever. Despite the trauma, he felt an immense sense of gratitude towards those who had rescued him and the medical staff who helped him heal. Ricky's story of survival and recovery became a testament to human resilience. His experience in the Outback was a powerful reminder of the strength of the human spirit and the capacity to endure even the most extreme conditions. Ricky's journey from the brink of death to recovery inspired many and highlighted the importance of hope, determination, and the will to survive against all odds. Despite Ricky's testimony to the police and his account of the events, the police were unable to find any evidence of the crime or Megee's stolen car, and no charges were ever brought against the alleged perpetrators. And that brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you again for joining us. A reminder that if you like such real-life stories, please be kind and subscribe to our channel. Your support will ensure that we are able to continue uploading new content every Friday and Sunday for your enjoyment. All the best and see you soon.